If you're just exercising or really doing anything just for this external piece, it's going to be really hard to not only stick with it, but to feel good about it. Welcome to the Team Look Fit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin Conlon. Each week, we share the evidence-based practices and communication-driven strategies we use with our clients to look, feel, and perform their best. So this week, I am joined with Coach Sam, and we have a really interesting podcast. We're going to be talking about body image, but in a lot of different ways, because body image is something that affects obviously all of us. But there are a lot of reasons why our body image would be affected positively or negatively. So I wanted to cover a little bit of the science and then also a lot of just what we see with coaching on a weekly basis and how we work with our clients through these body image struggles, because they really are, we're going to talk about some transient body image changes, and that's definitely something that can change on a day-to-day basis based on what's going on in your life.
Yeah. This is something that I've been really fascinated with lately, because I see this in my clients and I've seen it in myself, where first off, those transient issues where it's like one day we're feeling great, the next day we feel like shit. 9 times out of 10, we're PMSing around our period. But those changes happen from a day-to-day basis. And I have been really interested in how can we help lessen the how tumultuous that is. And also I've been really interested in the hedonic treadmill and how we're constantly chasing happiness in our life. And I feel like there's a parallel between body image and that hedonic treadmill, where we're constantly chasing this body or these improvements. But then once we hit that, there's a new thing we want to change. And so I think in this conversation, I'm looking forward to talking about what affects our body image and what we can do to improve it as on a day-to-day basis, and the different actions that we can do to help just kind of raise that baseline of how content we are with our bodies at all times.
Yeah, I like that idea when you shared with me the hedonic treadmill idea, and it's kind of talking about like how to raise that baseline, right? And we see this with a lot of different things, and we see this so many different facets, but getting to a baseline that is really stable, that's not always like so up and down, is really the root of what we're trying to do with a lot of our coaching practices, whether it is body image or it is, like your physical body, like your health, whatever. Like we want to avoid these huge swings either way. And obviously it takes time to get there, right? Especially if you have dealt with really, let's say, poor body image for most of your life. This is not going to be something that like you listen to our podcast and all of a sudden you're like, yay, I'm good to go. And even people who have a strong body image are going to have bad days. And I think that's something that I do definitely want to touch on, that a lot of people will see, like whether it's like a, like a fitness coach or like an online coach, and they're like, oh, like you must love working out all the time, or like you must love eating this food, or you must have the best body image because, this person is saying, oh, I like your body. That's not true, right? Like you can have the best body, air quotes, in the world and still have negative body image, even if you have developed a really strong sense of like yourself. It's just normal. Everybody's going to have those days, and it doesn't mean that you now have a poor body image because you had a bad day or two. Like,
absolutely. Yeah. My worst body image was right after I finished competing. Anybody who would have saw me on the street would have been like, holy shit, but it wasn't what I was. And so it's really, and you know that people are thinking, or you think that people are thinking things. They're probably not, but you think people are thinking things about your body. And so it doesn't, it's definitely not related to as much to your body, your actual physique, as it is to your mindset.
100%. So just to go over a little bit of just the science basics. And so one thing that we do know from the literature is that exercise does have an impact on body image. There is a huge correlation here. One of the meta-analyses that I looked through is 121 studies on how exercise impacted body image. That's a lot of studies.
Yeah.
And there were some what we would consider obvious conclusions, but exercise had a positive body image versus non-exercise. So exercising people versus non-exercising people. Okay. Exercise intervention, like if they did an intervention in a study, had greater positive body image changes versus a control group or a non-exercising group. Okay. Also makes sense. And then exercise had improvements in body image post-exercise. So there is a short-term benefit there as well. So somebody did something that was challenging, they felt, really good about it, their body image increased. So that was, stuff that seems pretty basic, but a lot of times research has to start there, right? You just kind of see,
Yeah.
okay, does this even have a relationship? And there does seem to be, it's not a huge difference, right? It's not like exercises versus non-exercisers had like this massive difference, but there is a positive benefit with exercise. And a lot of that comes down to just like, we all know when we strive towards something that is challenging, we feel better about ourselves, just because of that struggle, so to speak. But another study that I looked through, and I this is just through the abstract, and I actually want to find the real study. I just couldn't get it last night. I had to go through your institution or purchase it, and I was like, I'm not buying this $40 paper at midnight. So we're gonna look through the abstract. But one thing I just wanted to read. So a lot of times we talk about what is a positive body image, right? And they summarize it really nicely. They said individuals with a positive body image appreciate their bodies, hold an internal perspective of their bodies, and are satisfied with the functionality of their bodies. So I thought that was a really nice, like, working definition, because a lot of times it's like, what does this even mean? And if you are going through research, it is important for them to define that, because it might be different based on like what research group is writing this. So that's what they're defining here as like a positive body image. And there is also a difference between improving your body image versus decreasing your body dissatisfaction. So this is something that we talk a little bit about. Like there's certain things like hunger and satiety, right? Like they seem like the same thing, like, but they're not. Like they're very similar, but there are differences. And I guess in the literature, there has been, especially particularly in women, a lot of this research is focused on women. There has been a reduction in body dissatisfaction with exercising, but they were interested is like, what is creating this positive body image? So essentially what it showed was that exercise frequency was related to higher positive body image. Good. But high levels of appearance-based exercise motivation weakened these relationships. So their summary of this was that the messaging promoting exercise should de-emphasize just, physically what somebody is looking like, for like appearance reasons, and then, focus more on the other positive aspects, whether it is body image or just, self-efficacy, etc., health, not just aesthetics. So I thought that was a really nice study, and I definitely want to get the full paper because I think it would be cool to tease out those details. But this really goes back to the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And this is really the root of everything when we're speaking about, body image, or really why we're doing anything. And internal intrinsic motivation is very internal, right? It is your internal motivation. It's rewarding for you to do this, right? Maybe other people don't understand it, but it's just kind of for you. Versus extrinsic motivation, based on the name, is, it's based on external factors. So oftentimes what this looks like is it's more about avoidance. Sometimes it's about, receiving rewards or accolades or things of that nature, but a lot of times it's more of like an avoidance, or striving for something that maybe isn't what you necessarily want, versus intrinsic, which is a really, really important distinction. So again, didn't read that paper, so not sure if they worked that in there, but I think that is kind of like the where that debate centers, right? If you're just exercising or really doing anything just for this external piece, it's going to be really hard to not only stick with it, but to feel good about it. And that's what you were talking about in the beginning. Like, you want to feel good about this on a daily basis, right? And there's going to be fluctuations, but doing this for you is a lot different than doing this for maybe, say, somebody else or for some other external reason.
Yeah, I feel like that also goes along with the I should want this mindset, which I feel like is something that people get caught up in and they don't even realize they are. It's like, well, I should probably lose some weight. It's like, do you want to? And why do you want to?
Yeah.
And just because
you need to.
do you need to, or is this just like you're, oh, I've always been 120 and now I'm 130, so I should probably lose some weight. What? Why? I mean, if you're now unhealthy for some reason, which I mean, in those numbers, probably not, but if you are unhealthy for some reason, then yeah, maybe you should. And if that's something that you're committed to and that you want, awesome. But if it's just because you're not at a number you once were, or because someone in your life said, oh, you look a little bit bigger, that's probably not going to be something that's going to help you. You're probably not going to feel good once you actually reach that goal anyway, because it's very extrinsic, but it doesn't always feel that way.
Mhm.
So yeah, just a little sidebar there.
I think that that is, again, where this like all stems from, right? Are you doing it because there are valid reasons? And I think this conversation gets tricky, um, in the sense that it can sometimes seem, and maybe this is people's intention, I'm not sure. It can sometimes seem when people talk about this that they're saying like, don't have an aesthetic goal. Don't want to change your body. Don't, just kind of stay where you are. And I think that that can get kind of like murky, right? And we never want to promote that message, because why you want to do something, or why you want to look a certain way or feel a certain way or perform a certain way, that is 100% up to you. But Sam's point is more, okay, is it just an arbitrary number? Or is it saying, hey, I really just want to, I did gain these 10 pounds, and they were probably 10 pounds of body fat that I probably don't really need. And I don't really feel as good anymore. And
Right.
it was just because I was, maybe drinking too much, not as active, whatever. I want to get back to this, not because it's like, I used to be 120. I got to get back here because that's where my happy place is this number. It's no, I made these changes. I'm not comfortable and I want to get back here.
Right.
Same kind of conversation, but very different reasons. And that's what we want to talk about, was like kind of raising that baseline of your body image, and really focusing on the process versus just an outcome.
Yeah. And this is something I hear like all the time on social media, people saying like, focus on the process, not the outcome, which is 100% true. But I feel like it's one of the hardest things for people to do, because I'm not seeing these changes day to day. I'm not like, this process sucks a lot of the time. It's boring. It's like, it's hard. And it is, change is hard, and doing these things is hard. But if you want the outcome, you have to do the actions. And I think I want to say it was like Andy Frisell or I can't remember who said this once, but it stuck with me. And it's another thing that's on social media a lot, but the best way to raise your self-confidence is by doing the things you say you're going to do. And a lot of this body dissatisfaction, and even just like self-worth, can really go down when you say you want to lose those 10 pounds, awesome. But then all the things that would help you to lose those 10 pounds, you're not doing. And so you can really have that dissonance of like, well, this is what I want, but I'm not doing these things. And so therefore I'm not seeing any results, and I'm never going to get to where I want to be. And I look like shit. And that is just like that endless cycle of trying to do those things you can't do. Whereas if we can focus on the actions that are going to help you to get to that long-term goal, and we can check those boxes day in and day out, that's going to build confidence in yourself, which then I feel, and this is a lot of just speculation, postulating here, but I feel that really can translate into a more positive body image, because you're proud of the work that you're doing for yourself.
You're holding yourself accountable to what you say. And I think that, I'm like, was it Andy? Was it Ed? Was it somebody? I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's different packages of that same message, right? But it's a really, really important message, because I think we've all been there, right? We've all said, hey, I have this goal and I'm going to do it. And there are times when we're just executing and we're nailing it and we're working towards that. It doesn't mean that's an easy process, but it means that we are actively doing things that we say, like we verbally say, I want to accomplish this, and you're working towards it. Very, very different than saying, this is what I want, and then your actions are going against that, or you're not holding yourself accountable. And we've all gone through periods of time where we're like that, where we're just like, wow, I'm just kind of coasting. And it might not even, it could be worse than coasting, right? You could be kind of going backwards, and that is also something. But even if you're just kind of coasting, we get into that position where we're like, yeah, everything's kind of okay. But once you start coasting for long enough, you will start to go backwards, right? Because either, depending on like if it's something like business, right? If you're coasting, other people are moving forward. There's no way around it. Your competitors are moving forward, and you're going to eventually go backwards. If it's on an individual level, eventually that kind of coast, you start giving yourself excuses, and then it's like, oh shit, like you like look up and you're like, wow, I really haven't been holding myself to that. And I've talked about this on the podcast a little bit, but like that happened to me with training, right? Because for so long I trained pretty hard. And obviously I've dealt with many injuries, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
reasons why I've taken some peaks and valleys with training. But I got to a place where I'm like, I'm focusing on so many other things, that I'm training more for like a maintenance, and because it like makes me feel good, right? Not
Mhm.
because I'm like, I want to improve X thing. That would be very different focus. But with that in mind, it gets really easy to be kind of complacent. It gets really easy to be like, yeah, I plan on training 4 days, but like things got busy. Like I'll
Yeah.
just do 3 this week. And then 3 adds up. And then it's like, it's a heavy day today. Like I'll kind of go on that low end, I'll like lowball myself on that RPE. Or
Yeah.
I said I was going to start doing some cardio intervals, and I'm not,
Nah.
right? Like it's so easy.
Yeah.
And like, it's like, fuck, this is like what I do for a living, right? And so it's not like, and it's not even like I don't like it. Like I still enjoy doing it, but I'm putting other stuff before it. But then I recognize, okay, I'm not holding myself to the standard that is important. And that
Mhm.
standard is going to change, right? My standard now is very different than it used to be when I was like competing all the time, of course.
Mhm.
But that standard for my own self is still important. And when I was kind of coasting, that coasting started to go like, I'm kind of going backwards. And I had to say, all right, like this is
Yeah.
unacceptable, not because of how I looked, but just because
Mhm.
of how it made me feel, and saying, I'm going to do these things and just not doing them.
Right. And then, I mean, that eventually will affect the way that you look because you're not doing the things that are going to improve your physique over time. And if that's your goal, then you have to be doing those things. But one of the things that can trip people up so much is having that, we've talked about this before, and I think even you and I have talked about this before, but it's having the ideal action steps in your head. Like I should be, taking this pre-workout and this post-workout and this eating this much protein and all these like ideal things, and I need to be getting 10 hours of sleep a night, and like, hi, new mom
Sam's
here.
like, I wish.
What? No, like I can get 6. I can try to get 6. I can try to set a bedtime. I can try to put my phone away, but that's not ideal. That wouldn't be like if I were to sit down and write my optimal program or plan. That's not what it would look like, but it's all I can do right now. And I want to check that box that I'm doing things that are good enough and are what I can do right now. And so rather than having that ideal plan for yourself, adapt your expectations for the situation you're in and make them things that are challenging. They're going to push you, that will get you towards that goal, but that aren't unrealistic.
Mhm.
And over time, like really focusing on and I love that I just keep saying checking the boxes. I'm the kind of person who visually like checks the boxes. Like I love the first format for that I can click that like done. Like you just check the box and that is going to boost that self-esteem already. And you can look in the mirror at the end of the day and say like, yes, I'm doing the things that I need to do. And if over time you're not seeing those results, then you need to change the actions that you're doing, but we have to have the actions and not just focus on the outcome.
Mhm. And I know for people like us, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, it feels really good to create those like optimal or ideal checklists, right? And it's exciting. You're like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to totally revamp everything, da da da. And like, you might be, what most people do is they say those things on like easy days. They say those things when they have a
Mhm.
moment of clarity, right? Like when they're like, hey, I'm at the tail end of a 4-day, vacation, or I'm on, it's a relaxed Sunday. Like this, is I can totally do that this week. And then it's like fucking middle of a Tuesday and you're like, whoa, SOS, I cannot handle any of these things. And
Yeah.
now, because you set that expectation there, you are now going to not do it. And then that blowback and like that swing the other way is going to be so much worse. And
Mhm.
again, this is a really tough conversation because it's just kind of like the body image talk where we're saying we still want people to be able to change their bodies. Um, Also, there is a point where you do have to push yourself, right? You can't always say, oh, well, let me make it easier on myself because life's so hard. It's about being realistic, but also about continuously pushing yourself. So
Mhm.
like right now, you're very realistic about your situation. If you can get 6 hours of sleep, that's great.
Mhm.
Is that ideal? Is that perfect? Is that optimal? No. Would it be fantasy land for you to say, hey, I want to get 8 hours and then always feel like you're failing every week? Yeah. But is it
Mhm.
something else that you can control? Like, hey, I really want to get back into meal prepping. And you just continuously don't do that because you don't set up your other behaviors to accomplish that. That's not because you're too busy, that's because you didn't set the appropriate behaviors up, and now that's why you're failing. So there is a difference too of like adjusting those expectations, but also still being able to hold yourself accountable and push yourself. And I just feel like this is such a fine line with this conversation, because and it goes both ways, right? Like
Yeah.
as always, there's always the loudest people on like the tail ends of things. It's either like, no, if you can't handle it, like don't worry about it, like don't do it. Versus, you know, it doesn't matter what's going on, you should stay up until, 3 a.m. and prep your food and like
Grind.
right, like there, but it's like, okay, hey, like let's adjust this now.
Yeah.
Like let's take that as an example, because that's something that a lot of people really struggle with is food, and having adequate food prepped and being prepared in that situation. And if you're not prepared with your food, you're not going to be able to stay on track. So how can we navigate this situation? Does it look like maybe I need to order groceries through a grocery delivery app? Maybe I need to order meal prepped meals through a company like Icon Meals. Maybe I need to find a few local places that I can just grab a few meals that are really, really easy, like a bowl place or something like that, where you can just have some stuff on hand. Or, hey, what am I doing at, before or after work? Like there is likely an hour that you're fucking off that you could prepare some things. And it doesn't mean to be a gourmet meal prep. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the other day I came back from a trip and I didn't have like anything, right? So I luckily am usually smart enough to keep some stuff in the freezer because of that. So I'll keep a few Icon meals in the freezer always, just as like, hey, I'm, have these meals ready to go. They're already prepackaged and super easy to reheat. And I also will keep stuff in there like, hey, a pound of lean ground beef, and then like a bag of mixed veggies, and then like I had like this bag of like quinoa veggies, whatever, in the freezer. Throw that all in a pan, and I have 3 meals. Like it's not glamorous. It wasn't anything ridiculous, but it took me not very long to brown the meat and then heat up the carbs and the veggies. And so it's about setting that up instead of saying, oh, I have nothing to eat. Now, are there certainly times where I'm like, wow, I'm really behind, I need to go grab something or whatever? Yes, but 9 times out of 10, you should be setting yourself up for those behaviors in order to be successful. And that's really where this change is going to come from.
Yeah. And I think like moving into the next point, like with that change and how we were talking before, like, why do you want it? I think that like one of the things that we talked about is like asking what will change when you make that change, as opposed to thinking that just the change itself is going to solve all your problems, because that's where that, I think that treadmill is for any situation, is that I'll be happy when I get a new job. I'll be happy when I get a new car. And it's like, that one thing has changed in your life, but nothing else has. And the same thing can go for your body image and for just the quality of life, if we're not realistic about it and if we're not changing other things. So I'll be happy when I lose 10 pounds. Okay, did you lose those 10 pounds in a sustainable way where you're going to be able to keep this weight off and you're going to be able to maintain this lifestyle? Because then, you're probably going to be happier. You're probably going to have a healthier life long term. But if you lost that weight by not eating for 2 weeks and then you hit that number, sweet, but now you're miserable. You're going to rebound and gain even more weight back. Everybody in your life hates you because you've been so like grouchy this whole time. Like your quality of life probably isn't going to be better. So asking yourself what you really want at the end of this and what will like be realistic about what's going to change when you get there. I think that can help to decrease the dissatisfaction that can come with reaching a goal where you want to compete in a show. You make it to show day and you're thinking, I'm going to win. It's going to be amazing. It's going to change my life. I'm going to get like 75 sponsors and like move, like just become a pro my first show. And then you get there and you don't do well. And then you're like, crap, like now my life feels worse. Like that's going to, that you've hit that goal, but you have this added dissatisfaction. You're probably going to feel like shit about your body too. So having that, again, realistic expectation, telling yourself like, by doing the show, I'm going to do a show, and that's pretty badass. That's awesome. Anything else that comes from that, sweet. But like, this is the main goal. This is what's going to change realistically. And this is why I'm doing this.
For sure. And that goes for every goal, no matter how big or how small it is. And that's going back to that kind of intrinsic motivation, right? And you have to be realistic about what is going to change. You know, hey, why are you caring about prepping meals? Why can't you just, get fast food?
Mhm.
Well, this is how I feel when I eat this food, or how I don't feel, or, whatever. Like there's a big
Yeah.
difference between how you feel when you eat different types of food. This is, what my health markers look like. This is, how my performance is. This is how my sleep is. Like being realistic with like what are the actual tangible outcomes that are happening, not just like, well, I think if I prep my food I might look better because I hate myself. Like, okay, you're going to probably go to the drive-through then, because it's not
Yeah.
enough of a reason to actually create that change.
Mhm.
So we did want to talk about those transient body image changes, right? And there's going to be a few reasons why we have transient body image changes. And I would say the two biggest ones, of course, for female listeners will be cycle related changes. And then also just like high periods of, I would say, stress, but also just like chaotic times. We'll just call it that, because as you guys know, we're all about stress is not necessarily bad. It's about stress perception, et cetera, et cetera. Plugging the upside of stress for the millionth time. I think it's great. I'm like, I have to think of like, what are the books that I'm most tagged in, right? Like, because I always talk about them. Upside of Stress, which is amazing. Extreme
12 rules.
Ownership,
12
and 12
rules.
Rules for Life. Those three are my top three that everybody's like, Lauren. I was like, yes. Like if I
I think
did
you
one
might
thing,
have wrote them, right? Like you're co-author on some of those, right?
yeah. Oh,
At this
obviously.
point.
Totally. No, but those are all amazing books. And I'm like, if people take that away from the book recommendations that I give, like those are three fucking awesome
Yeah.
books. So thank you. But so yeah, it's not, let's not call it a high period of stress. I mean, we can, but just chaotic times. Even if it is good stress, it could just still be chaotic. So let's first touch on the cycle related changes, and how that influences body image.
Yeah. I think this can go this, but just talk about cycle right now. I bet it's also like a time, like all of these things individually, you could say like, oh, this can affect it too. But we have to think about what's going on in your body in the week leading up to your period and the week of your period. And this looks different for everybody. And this can change throughout your life too. You might have different symptoms when you're 30 than you did when you were 20, than you will when you're 35. But you have bloating with an increased water retention. You have a poor mood, which is going to affect your outlook on everything. You're short-tempered. A lot of people have lack of sleep, pain, which again is going to further increase a negative mood. A lot of times we have changes in our complexion and acne, which is probably going to affect the way you feel about yourself. So all of those things in isolation can make you feel like shit. But when they're all happening all at once, it's very difficult to see past that. And on top of all of that, a lot of times when this is happening during PMS, we aren't able to connect the dots for some reason that like, oh, I'm PMSing. It's just like, why do I feel like shit? Why am I so pissed off? Why do I go gain 10 pounds? And it's like, it just can bring you right down. And I can look at a client's check-in sheet and be like, PMSing, we're PMSing. And then it's like, I look at their cycle where they are. Yeah.
Yep.
Have you noticed what day we are in your cycle? Oh yeah. Oh my God. No wonder. But it's really hard to see that when you're in it, just
Yep.
like anything else. And there's so much power in just that realization to say like, hey, period, Sam, I hear you. Like, I see what you're seeing. This is temporary and it's going to pass. And nothing has changed from who I am. Yes, who I was yesterday than I am today, except for my hormone levels. Like, it's going to be okay and it's going to pass. But if we can't recognize that, shit, it's
Yeah.
bad.
I would say the biggest trend that I see with clients around their cycle, and I say around because, like you mentioned, everybody is different. Some people ovulation week is tough. Some people it's the week
Yeah.
before. Some people it's the week during. It's going to be different for everybody. But what I see mostly is just that the dysregulation of mood and like feeling like that very overwhelmed, like stressed feeling where everything just feels very, very magnified.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, like, no, this is, remember where we are, like, this is probably what's going on. And then literally like the next week, it'll be like day, like night and day, just a completely different type of check-in.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's going to be some of the most common stuff, is just to have a handle on like when, when things are, just check in with yourself. If you're like, wow, I've been like really agitated for the past 2 days, like this is not me,
Yeah.
and like where am I in myself, like what's going on? And then it could be very clear. So I always like to try to say things like understanding why things are happening often doesn't make it, like, it doesn't take away like the pain or the stress or the frustration, but it just allows you to cope with it better, right? It's literally, you can use that for any situation.
Yeah.
Just understanding, recognizing where, okay, hey, let me reflect on this, let me detach a little bit, why am I acting like this, why does everything feel so overwhelming? And is it, hey, maybe it is a chaotic time, right, which would be another one of these situations, or maybe it is my cycle, and that's where you would be able to check in a little bit. And yeah, I would say these high chaotic, high stress times, um, no one really looks their best in those situations. And I would say there are there's two types of people that I typically see. People who, when they get very, very stressed and anxious, they either turn to food as kind of like comfort, and they typically have a higher appetite, or higher cravings, desire to eat, I guess would be a better way of putting it. Or the opposite, people just don't want to eat, and their appetite goes to shit, they don't even really recognize that they're not eating as much, etc. So there's really like two responses. But in both cases, whether you're eating more or you're eating less, you probably still won't feel like you're having the best body image, even if your body is changing in a way that would be that you want, right? Like, say you want to gain weight, or say you want to lose weight. Even if you are doing both of those things, you probably still won't have the best body image, because of this very, very high stress situation, and likely having like all this adrenaline dump and all this cortisol dump. Your body just isn't going to be like this perfectly peaked physique, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to like wake up and be like, wow, like you're probably going to be holding water in weird ways. You might just have like kind of, it's like this like stress film that people almost get, you know what I mean? And even if you've lost weight, so it doesn't even matter like what body composition changes are happening, you just don't typically physically look as good. But really what's compounding this is that mentally, things are so chaotic and you're so overwhelmed that you just feel like shit. Like, even if somebody does look great, even if somebody, like, I'm like, damn, like we've made a lot of progress this week, like, your check-in photos are great, all the biofeedback that I should be looking at would, like, measurement wise, quantitatively wise, is on track. But physically, like internally, somebody feels so off that they're not like reaping those rewards necessarily. So I think that it really, a lot of times the body image changes from those high chaotic, high stress situations are not even like what something physically is like you're looking like. It's more just like this internal state, magnified.
Yeah. And like with all of those things, you also have, again, a lot of the same things from your period, like lack of sleep. When you're stressed, you're probably not sleeping your best. If you are overeating because of stress, you're going to have that increased water retention from that. And those are things that can happen just on a day-to-day basis that can affect your body. And it can, like you said, I don't know how many times I say in my check-ins, I know this doesn't make it any easier, but recognizing this can help us to reflect on it. And that can, if you ate out the night before, you might not look your best the next day. If just based on how much sodium was in the food, or if it was a food that you don't usually eat and how it's affecting your body and your digestion. Digestion can affect the way that you look.
Yeah. And there's a big
hydration.
tie with, and not everybody, I have some clients this doesn't affect at all, but I have a handful of clients that have a very strong tie between just their gut in general and their like internal state. So when things are going awry, like, externally, the internal, like, gut and digestion and all that, bloating, water retention. I mean, there are some people who have this so severely, like, and it just, that's really why I actually started looking into all the stress perception stuff, because I thought I just seeing this trend of like my very, very high negative stress perception clients having these gut issues. And I was like,
Mhm.
there has to be something here, like
Yeah.
this is happening enough to where it doesn't feel like a coincidence anymore. And
Mhm.
now I've just, I worked with enough people to see, okay, there is a trend and it's not everybody. But there are certain people that, like, when there is a big spike and like these kind of negative things that are going on in their life, we do see, whether it's, poor digestion, bloating, water retention, food sensitivities, like those
Mhm.
types of things are really, really magnified for certain clients. So if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, that is me, this is something that is fairly common.
Mhm.
And it's something that I see quite a bit, actually. So
Same.
working on that stress perception through these challenging times, again, such an important thing to have.
Mhm.
But especially if you are somebody who is really physically negatively affected by stressors, not just like, oh, I didn't sleep or whatever, but it's like
Yeah.
you now can't digest food properly. And that's going to, of course, more so negatively influence your body image because you don't feel so great. And it's like this
Yeah.
never ending loop.
Yeah. It really is. And I think that that goes to the next point pretty well, is like, how do we stop the loop, and how do we find ways to find body satisfaction or have a more positive body image, even when things aren't like where we see the end being, like, if we're not to the end goal yet, can we find some level of body satisfaction so that when we get there, we have that body satisfaction? Because odds are, and what I've seen in myself and again in other people, is like, if even when I reach that goal, I'm not happy because there's always something else I can improve. Just like when I started this initial goal, I was trying to improve these initial things. And so I feel, and this is again conversation. I just want your opinion on this. Like, can we find ways to be positive about ourselves now, find things that we like about ourselves now? And in doing so, will that help the way we feel at the end of our goal?
100%. And I think
Yeah.
having, part of it is being, again, I always go back to being realistic, right? I think that being realistic with yourself is probably the most important thing that any of us can employ. And that means looking at yourself in the best ways possible and the worst ways possible. It's about recognizing what you're good at, what you're, poor at, what you can improve. But there's always something that you can hold on to say, like, all right, I want to make these changes, but there are these other really good things that I'm good at, right? If you're constantly telling yourself, like, I'm stupid, like I'm lazy, I'm this, I'm that, like, and maybe you have been lazy for a while, right? Like maybe you need to call yourself out and be like, you know what, my actions are not lining up with the person that I want to be. But okay, maybe I have been a little bit lazy here. What else can I do? What else am I good at? Right. And being able to reflect on, okay, what are some of the positives that you can offer and things that you're good at right now? And
Mhm.
building upon those and understanding and reflecting, there is going to always be change.
Mhm.
But really having that kind of gratitude of your current situation, whether that's like your current life, your current body, your current level of whatever it is that you're trying to work through.
Mhm.
You being grateful for where you are is really, really key, but also recognizing, okay, I'm grateful, but I can still build on this. And I
Yeah.
think it's about like marrying those two things, and being able, like I said, just being realistic, because I think a lot of times, we're all really guilty of either lying to ourselves or giving ourselves like either maybe too much praise or like too much praise isn't really the right word, but I don't know, too
Credit.
much, I don't know, too much praise, or being too hard on ourselves, right? We're
Yeah.
just gonna leave that there, or too hard on ourselves, right? And like not, and beating ourselves down essentially,
Mhm.
where it's like, all right, neither of these are helpful because both of these are not necessarily reality. They're just like the skewed levels of reality. So yeah, what are some of the things that I do need to work on? But what are some of the things that I have right now? And also, especially if we're talking about physical body image, maybe you don't like your body at all right now. Maybe you're like, I am so uncomfortable with my physique, with my body, with how I've treated myself for all of these years. But what's something that you can be grateful for? That you made the decision that you wanted to change this, right? You said you woke up one day and you were like, you know what, I want to make this change. I want to do this for myself for these reasons. And at least
Mhm.
you have that. Even if you have nothing else, you at least have that you recognize that in yourself. And that's something that you can continuously go back to and say, okay, no, I was, strong enough to realize that I could detach from my situation, recognize what was wrong, and now I'm taking the adequate steps to move forward. You need to have certain behaviors in place in order to keep yourself moving forward. But even if you have nothing else, you can always go back to that one thing.
Yeah, that's where we go back to the action steps, is that then you can start being grateful for the things that you're doing as opposed to the things that you're necessarily seeing right now. And one last point on that is to asking yourself, where does this perception of myself come from? Because a lot of times that can be
Ooh,
really
buckle up.
skewed. Yeah, exactly.
We're
Like,
okay,
why do I feel this way? Why do I feel like my arms
why
are,
am I like this?
why am I like this? That never ending question. But this is the story I tell my clients all the time, because it was like the most like light bulb moment for me. Is I was watching TV with my husband, and he made a comment on someone's legs and was like, oh man, her legs are like, I'm so not attracted to her legs. And her legs were legs that I had like wanted my entire life. And I was like, I've been working my whole life to look like that. And he's like, oh no, I love your big, strong legs. And I'm like, why am I trying to achieve this appearance that the one person that I want to be attracted to me is not attracted to? And it helped me to really have like
Damn
that
it.
click in my head that like,
Could you have said this a few years ago?
yeah, come on, what the hell? But really, everyone has a different thing that they're attracted to. We have this traditional standard of beauty that we all feel like we have to meet, and that changes all the time.
Always
And
changes.
it's so we need to do a whole podcast on beauty standards and social media and how messed up that is, because there's Instagram called Celeb Face. Everybody go follow it right now, because they show like the photoshopped image and the not photoshopped image, or like
Rough.
face tuned influencers.
Bro, I'm sorry. I know that J-Lo is a very attractive person. Like, she has a banging body. She's gorgeous. But holy tits, does this chick face tune her face? Like,
Uh-huh.
I'm talking, no, I don't, you can have the best camera and the best lighting, but everybody has like dimension
Of
to their
course.
face. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like the Kardashians, hey, we all like Kris Jenner looks awesome. Like, I got to give it to her. Like, this lady runs all these companies, she's 60 something, right? Like, she looks great, takes care of herself. But hey,
Doesn't look like that.
we can tell this is not, and that's okay. I'm not somebody who's like never use a filter, never use like no, I'm not like that. But when it is so extreme all the time, and there are, and I don't think we should police people doing that either. I think everybody should fucking do whatever they want. Like, that's just me, like pro liberty, like for everything, like do what you want. Hey. But I think that just having the conversation to recognize that like this is the case, you know what I mean?
Exists. And if you're
everybody has an iPhone. That if they're using an iPhone, it's the same iPhone that you have. Their camera isn't that much better, right? Unless you have an iPhone 4 and they have a 12. But you're seeing them take this picture and you're like, I don't look like that.
Yeah.
Well,
and you're based, exactly, if you're basing your body image off of a body that doesn't exist, that's a problem.
yes,
and that's going to create a lot of pain for you.
Yes.
And again, so like that's what was saying, was like, you don't, like, where's your perception coming from, and where are your standards coming from? Because this is where we're getting into a whole thing of like, everybody and their mom going to get a BBL, when like it's so dangerous.
Also, yeah. Hey, most dangerous plastic surgery ever. So, also, I'm just like, I don't know. I see, and of course, you see like basically like the botched versions of them, right? There's plenty of people who get breast implants who look terrible, and that's just because they had a bad surgery, or they get Botox and now they look crazy. Obviously it happens on all spectrums. But the BBL can be so dramatic, right? And the way that people like stand and the clothes that they wear, like all of that, like it's so funny because like I can see it, but even though I can see it, I'm still like, man, like that looks good. Like, it looks good in a picture, you know what I mean? It looks good in that pose. It looks good. And even somebody who like, I know what all these like apps are doing and all that, you can still be like, damn, like Kris Jenner looks better than me, right? You're like, what the
Right.
fuck?
And you're aware of it. And so many people aren't.
But yeah, and so it's like, hey, okay, we have to, again, that goes back to like that full circle to that intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. I can wish all day long, and maybe I could get a BBL technically. I mean, I don't know, I'm not, but if I wanted big hips and a huge ass, right? Because I don't have hips. I just don't. Like I'm a very imagine you like show up, you're like, can I get a BBL? They're like, for what?
No, you
Why?
can't actually.
They're like, have you seen your ass? Like,
I'm the first person who's denied a BBL.
they're like, you're curvy enough, girl. But like, I'm straight. I am like just straight up wide waist, narrow hips. Like it's my body, you know. So I could like look at that all day long and be like, that's amazing. And maybe if people really want that, they like hate how they look and they want to change it and there's a surgery for it, like go for it. But you also have to be realistic with like, if you're looking at pictures like that and you're seeing somebody like I can't change that structure unless I did that, right? And then that's when you make that decision. Like everything goes back to like what decisions do you want to make? What actions and what outcomes do you want? If I want big ass hips, I got to get a BBL. Like,
Yeah.
but you know, and I can appreciate people's bodies who have like, I appreciate those bodies and I can look at them and be like, wow, that looks great. But I don't like hate myself for not, you know, having that. I say, okay, I learned how to dress that fits my body better. And I keep it moving. I'm gonna get a BBL. I don't want anybody to be concerned if they listen.
Yeah. No,
They're like, is Lauren? No.
Not today. But
Don't
that
worry.
also is that acceptance too. And I think that's the last piece is like being able to accept the headaches prayer, or whatever, being able to accept the things you can't change and being able to accept the things about yourself that make you, that differentiate you from someone else. It can be really easy. And that's where I lived the first half of my life, being like hating my legs, hating my butt, because my friends were all string beans. My friends were all so skinny and I wasn't. And I wasn't big by any means, but just wasn't their size. And I hear that story so many times from my clients. It's like, I just look different than everybody else. And I hated that. And the power
But
comes
here's the thing
in.
too. It's like, did you really, or was it also your perception? Because
Exactly.
when you look back at pictures, you're like, I didn't look any different than everybody. I mean, of
Exactly.
course you
I
did, but
felt
like
different.
you
Yep.
felt different. It's not even necessarily real. It's like how
Yeah.
you felt.
Yeah. And again, that's why did I feel that way? Because of what I was seeing and what I was exposed to and what I was hearing, for me, what I was hearing. And again, when you come into your own and you say like, okay, I have an ass, like I'm never not going to have an ass. The only time I don't have an ass is when I'm stage lean, and that sucks. So I don't want to do that. Like,
Oh god.
I still got a little ass, a lot different, but I gotta send you a picture after this. I'll post it maybe the day I send this, but there's a picture I took of me like sideways and it is like, and then I'll post it side by side. It's like a different person, but yeah, it's just like coming into that realization that like you have certain traits that make you who you are and that might not ever change, and that's okay. And the power of accepting that, it honestly makes change a lot easier because you're not fighting the like the inevitable, you know?
Yeah, you're appreciating other people for what they have, and you're also appreciating yourself. You know, I think it's important to like, you can still like those things on other people. You know, like I'm never gonna have blue eyes. Like I guess I could wear contacts, you know what I mean? But like right, like it's just like one of those things like, wow, like I love blue eyes. Like I can appreciate that in other people. But it's like you know, I'm not like, oh my gosh, I don't have blue eyes. Like, what can I do like with my life? Like I appreciate other things that I have that maybe other people don't have, right? So it's just one of those things that like having gratitude, accepting yourself, and also being able to appreciate other people with, you know, other people's bodies, because we're talking about body image here, appreciating other things that people have without necessarily hating that you don't have that either.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a really good place to end, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so this was a fun episode. I knew we were going to talk about a bunch of different things, but I think this was really, really useful. And this is a conversation that we weave into so much of our coaching. So if you guys liked this episode, please share. We would really appreciate it. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all podcast platforms as well. So if you have any other questions about coaching, you can also go to teamlocofit.com. And we appreciate you guys for listening as always, and we'll talk to you soon.